Welcome to the Portable Hole Podcast. I'm Ryan George, and I'm here with Justin. He is back in studio, and of course, Cynic is out this week. So you guys missed each other for a second straight week. But Justin, you had an interesting week off. I saw that you were busking, and you also some reckless driving. So why don't you tell me about that?
All right. So we'll start with the busking. I've never been much of a busker, but I was with my friend down in Key West. He was like, "Let's go busk. I have a license." So we went and
Wait, you need a license to busk?
you need a license to busk, and in fact,
Really?
you need a license to busk in a lot of places. Yeah,
Oh
legally.
wow, I didn't know that. Okay, okay.
So we're there. We're busking. Yeah, it went well. I learned a little bit about it. Like, really, you need a shill to come up to you and make requests, right? Because it's tough. Like, there's people and they sing along and they walk, and some people give you money, but things didn't open up until some guy. Where was he from? He might be from Argentina. Like, came up to me and was like, "Can you guys play Sweet Home Alabama?" I was like, "Sure, we can." And then it sort of uplifted the whole thing, and it was fun because tourists and foreigners appreciate that. So it was fun. But code enforcement came up to us. The guy was really nice for a couple reasons. First off, we were using amplification, which we're not supposed to do, and my buddy didn't know that. So he's like, "You're not allowed to do that." And he's also said, "It wasn't both of you. It was just, but with both of you busking." And my friend Bill was like, "Nope, just me," because he's the one with the license. Another thing we didn't know.
Oh wow.
Both people have to have licenses. And we think that it was another busker who called code enforcement on us.
Wow.
The guy sort of implied that, although there's no way he would know, but he said a lot of times other buskers will call us if you're muscling in on their territory.
Wow. No,
it's pretty funny.
If they caught you while you were in the middle of playing, could you have gotten in trouble or fined or anything?
I don't know. Probably just given a warning and just saying, maybe my buddy could have, maybe they would have fined him. He's the one with the license. I don't know. I don't know how much they really care, but maybe they care a little bit.
All right. Well,
and by the way, I was down
in
I was down in Key West, by the way.
Okay.
So that's where this was taking place, which is a very cool area. Have you been down there?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's worth going. So we rented some scooters, some mopeds, and the one that we rented was way, way more powerful than I was used to. And it had a different braking mechanism. The guy was like, "Don't use the right brake, and only use them together or left brake." It was a little confusing. So I was making a turn, and I thought I was used to it, and I thought, "Oh, this feels good. I'm used to it," and I wasn't, and it just gave so much more power, and it was just very awkward. The controls for it, and basically, I just lost control and smashed into a car. And my girlfriend was like, "I have no idea how you still have a knee after that." And I was like, "You know what? It just looks like after a Muay Thai training session. That's all it is." So
yeah, it looked pretty bruised up, but not.
It was pretty bruised up.
Well, it's funny.
The police officer came over and was like, "Here's a ticket for reckless driving." Like, reckless driving?
Wait, you really got a ticket?
I did. I got it. He gave me a ticket.
Oh wow!
I think it was. Yeah, he actually gave me a ticket for reckless driving. So I'm going to fight it. I'm going to be like, there was nothing reckless. I was going the speed limit. I stopped at the stop sign. I just simply lost control. Like, an accident doesn't mean it was reckless. So he did give me a ticket for reckless driving.
I was joking about the reckless driving. I didn't actually realize
but I got a ticket for it.
Legitimately got a ticket.
Technically,
wow.
I was.
Wow. Okay. I know you've been traveling, but have you been watching anything this past couple of weeks besides Reacher, which we'll get to a little bit later?
Not too much right now. I've been watching this. You know what? It's funny for our old. This would have been a great topic for our old show, the Gymwits. There is a it was on Netflix. I forgot what it's on, but I've been watching it, which is basically about what happens with people's health if they go vegan. And it's an honest one. Have you seen the show? I forgot the name of it. And they put people on these diets with exercise and they just compare it and they talk about it. And it's not only vegan, but what happens if you start eating, a lot more plant-based diet, what happens to your health. And it's a popular show right now. I got to give you the name of it. It
Mhm.
would have been perfect for the
Okay,
gym
yeah.
wits.
Yeah.
So I've been
No,
watching
no,
that one a
is
little bit.
it
It's pretty interesting.
what's the
Gotta get
verdict
the
so
name of it for
far? I
you.
mean, does it seem to lean towards like, yeah, you can vegan, results be just the same, or not, or,
The
or
the,
what's the, I guess, what's the angle of it actually too? Yeah,
the,
is more of a,
the angle of it is you're going to be a lot healthier if you eat a lot more plant-based foods.
yeah.
That's what it
Mhm.
really comes down to. It shows that people who eat a lot more plant-based stuff are less likely when in older age to develop dementia, and Alzheimer's. They lose weight. They're healthier. There's certain their organs are in better health. So stuff like that.
I'll give my one
What about
recommendation
you?
for this week. Actually, a solid movie. We were kind of browsing over the weekend for something to watch, and came across a movie called She Came to Me. So it stars
Hmm.
Peter Dinklage, Marissa Tomei, and Anne Hathaway are the kind of leads. With then there are a couple of younger actors as well. And so the premise, and this is, I'm not spoiling anything. This is all in the trailer. But basically, Peter Dinklage plays a an opera. I believe he's a composer. Um, I'm not sure if he also writes. I think he's a writer as well. So composer writer who has kind of lost his mojo. His wife is his old therapist, who is Anne Hathaway, and he runs into a chance encounter with the character played by Marissa Tomei, who turns out to be a little nutty and a bit of a stalker. And they have a one night stand. That one night, oh, and she's a tugboat captain. And they have a one night stand, and that inspires him to write his next opera, which is a huge success. And then she's back in the picture, and hilarity ensues. And what's cool about that's all in the trailer, so not giving anything away. But what's cool about it is it is that, right? You do get that, and it's funny and it's well done, and they're really good performances. But there's also like a much more heartwarming story buried inside of it
Hmm.
that was just unexpected. And so it's just a really
Okay.
good movie, easy to watch. Yeah, like an easy watch, again, very good performances, and kind of took an unexpected turn, because I think when you have that premise and the way things are going, you kind of expect one thing, and again, you do get that, but it then kind of takes a bit of a turn into something that's not that, and it was actually very good. So highly recommended. If you want something this kind of easy to watch. I think we rented it on Amazon, so I don't know that it's playing like on any streaming platforms without having rented, but solid
Hmm.
recommendation.
Oh,
If you're
you
looking
know
for a
what?
movie to watch.
I did see something else that I
Okay.
recommended that you see. It was called "Here Comes the Next Challenger," and
Okay,
it
yeah.
it was
How was it?
a
So,
it was a documentary on Street Fighter Two, and for
yeah,
if you are uh, Ryan and I's ages, and or if even if you were a little younger, and I know that there's like been new generation, a lot of new
yeah,
generations have been playing this, and now a lot of young kids are playing it, but we can't express just how big Street Fighter 2
yeah.
was. It was
It
like
was
one of
massive. Yeah,
those games that if you played video games, if you were a part of everyone played it. It was the game like
yeah,
culturally for kids our age and a little bit older and a little bit younger.
yeah,
It was so impactful. It was just like like you can remember it, right? Just how big that game was, like
yeah,
at the time.
yeah. No,
Like,
so
did
and
you
so
ever go
what's
to
so
an
the documentary? Is
arcade
it?
and like?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
of course.
it's really interesting. It talks
Yeah.
about first off a little bit of the origins of fighting games, video
Hmm.
games, and those sort of the one-on-one concept. And there was the original Street Fighter where they were starting to come up with it, and then it talked about the character development and how it wasn't completely PC. It probably couldn't come out now. Um,
Hmm.
and then they went into some technical issues about how they were going to program it, because I always find that fascinating, because at the time it's not like it is now where you can program a movie as a video game, right? It was a lot more
Yeah.
difficult. So they went into some technical things, and then they went into they talked about the woman who composed the music, which was really interesting. um, they talked about some of the storylines and where they got their ideas from, and they talked about some of the way that it was licensed for home systems. It was just really interesting, and then how the fans really influenced the decisions to make future games. They're like, oh well, we want this. They did it. Well, we want this.
Yeah.
They did it. It's too slow. It was funny. There was a hack that I had never heard of that was really fast, and they were like, well, if
Yeah.
and the game makers were like, well, if we don't match this, we're gonna lose out to this
Yeah.
illegal hack that's making the rounds. So basically, they had to match it. It was really interesting. So
Good.
if you
Okay,
are
yeah,
our
no.
age and you remember the Street Fighter 2 and just how big that game was and just how influential it was. And
Well,
then it was
yeah.
funny because there was a whole list of copycat games that
Yeah.
came out. I remember they touched on Mortal Kombat a little bit, but not too much because those were always the two games. And Mortal Kombat, looking back, was not a very good game. It got better, I think, but by then I had lost interest.
Yeah.
It was just cool because of how gory and bloody it was, and
Violent.
and,
Yeah.
and violent, which was cool. But it wasn't actually the gameplay. I remember not being very good. Saying it's not very fun to play. Like Street Fighter was a lot more fun because the controls were they were like like that was a big thing. They were like, if we don't make these controls very natural, it's not going to be good. So they really stressed the importance of very natural controls. Interesting stuff. So
yeah, cool.
Very
yeah,
portable.
no, definitely something I saw you posted it. Yeah, definitely something I'm gonna check out. So let's get right to some news. So there's a bunch of, I mean, there's so many kind of interesting news stories that I don't know where to start. I don't know how much we're going to actually keep, and some we might save. But something that came up a couple weeks ago,
that the NFL rigged the playoffs to get the Super Bowl so that Taylor Swift.
All right, so I guess we'll start with that one.
Can
right, yeah.
Recruit Democrats to vote for Biden, right?
Yeah, well, okay, well, that was actually one of the news story, right? Like, so there's, I guess you have heard the conspiracy theory that this is all a psyop, and some level of like the entire relationship is fake, and that everything has been rigged so that in the middle of the Super Bowl or at some point she can endorse Biden, and people seem very angry. It is really weird. I mean, I think we all like us a good conspiracy theory, but it's unbelievable that anybody could actually believe that. We're just gullible.
Sometimes that's just the answer.
I don't know,
people are just really dumb.
Yeah, or just want to believe something like that. It's like there are plenty of conspiracies that are true and easy to believe in. That like that's not one of them. And I get it. Like I think if you're on, it's like we all like I think we all have our blind spots and our areas where like when our guy is in office we don't scrutinize things nearly as much as when the other guy is, or guy or girl. And
I haven't had my guy in
like,
office
I think
ever
a large
in my
part
life.
of it is like she's a massive star and she's getting people to vote, and the demographic don't work well for that side. So but like to take it so it's like, okay, cool, get it. I'm sure again I have my blind spots, but like to take it to the extent that like this is like just a crazy conspiracy that she's gonna endorse Biden and have every teenage girl in the country stand in line to vote for Biden is kind of silly. So the big news story this week, which is just insane. So have you been following any of the Vince McMahon stuff?
A little bit, yeah. I've been reading up on it. Just
okay, all right.
Everything from
I'm gonna recount this
trafficking and just crazy.
Yeah.
But
so I'm gonna recount some of this.
The funny thing is that none of it. I think the craziest part of all of it is that none of it is a shocker. I think that with Vince McMahon, we've known this stuff for decades. What he's been made of.
Yeah,
I'm not shocked at all.
Yeah,
I mean everything what's going on is shocking, but I'm not shocked at all.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go over it a little bit step by step, just so because there's a lot involved in this. So
yeah.
He had several scandals in the last over the last few years that at one point resulted in him being kind of cast aside from the WWE for all intents and purposes. and then he kind of was able to strong arm his way back in because they were trying to sell, which they eventually did, to TKO, or or to the company that owns the UFC, that now they merged and become TKO. And he was kind of, I think, the chairman of the board, still a potentially large role within the company. And then news broke last week that there was a lawsuit by Janelle Grant, who's been identified and is out there. So them, not like naming somebody who's being, trying to stay anonymous.
Sure.
But like the accusations are just insane. So basically, and you can read that you can, if you can find, there's a story, a good story in the Wall Street Journal, but you can even read the entire, I guess, not the entire case file or whatever. But basically, her parents died. So they lived in Vince McMahon's building, I'm not mistaken. Her parents died. She was facing some financial hardships. So you got somebody who's dealing with a lot of stress, both with parents and also financially. And she's introduced to Vince McMahon, who showers her with gifts, takes her to shows, offers her a job, and she gets a good paying job in the WWE. But he's effectively at some point just manipulated her into performing whatever sex acts that he wanted. And then, she alleged that she was forced into it, that she was coerced in order to keep her job. There was accusations of outright just rape and sexual assault. There was this, as you mentioned, the sex trafficking allegation, where he basically ordered her to perform acts with other executives. There's allegations of that, even that as part of Brock Lesnar's deal to come back to the WWE, she was part of it, as in she was gonna have to offer herself to him and sent lewd video or explicit videos to him, and they were supposed to meet up, but I think weather stopped that from happening. I mean, it just, there are text messages out there. I'm not going to go through reading them, but you can find them, that are just
Brock
insane.
Lesnar,
Yeah,
sorry, I gotta just chime in at this point. If you're Brock Lesnar,
yeah,
really, like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, what, you couldn't find another woman willing to provide sex acts to a very famous celebrity, right? You have to,
I mean,
what it just
at
doesn't
some
make
point,
any
right?
sense.
Like I wouldn't. So it's like, at some point, right? Like, we both know, like, that. I mean, there's so many situations of people. I mean, obviously, like, this is beyond just
It's
like
just,
cheating,
oh,
but
of course,
it's just debaucherous. But I think you do have this kind of boys club, bro kind of
sure.
mentality, that I could see somebody like that, like, oh, it's just almost like it's a cool thing. Oh, look at this, he's offering her, like that. Who knows what the nature of their relationship is? Who's trying to impress
Sure.
who? What kind of crap they talk? And then all of a sudden you've got this, this poor person, poor woman, who's like being thrust into the middle of everything. And yeah, it's like, it's one of those things. I think the more you read it, uh, you can't think about any of it with logical, like through any kind of
Sure.
logical lens,
Yeah.
because none of it makes sense. Why did because, like, even if you're Vince McMahon, you're a billionaire, you could walk down the street and, if you really want to, cheat, there would be plenty of people out there. So why go through this? Again, why, the assault allegations,
Well,
and
with Vince,
the
it makes
why
sense
is he
because he's a psychopath, right? And so you could see him
and Brock isn't? I
basically.
mean,
I don't know. I don't know too
yeah,
much about Brock's personality on the
yeah,
outside, but no, you know what? I'm wrong. Vince isn't a psychopath. He's a sociopath, right? So different.
okay,
So like, he actually he enjoys this. I could see him just enjoying the fact that he would be able to manipulate this person to do that and show it off to his friends, and just like, it makes sense coming from Vince that he would
yeah.
he would find himself in a situation like this. It's not the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and no, that's the thing, is like, I can totally see that. It's like something, almost a badge of honor,
Yes,
to
I
do
would
that. But it's
call it
just,
that.
Yeah, it's bad. And then there was another thing that came out. So apparently, the person that he was kind of, because if you look at it, it's like he's saying all this stuff about how he's the one that gets to schedule who she's with or whatever. And so there's another major executive within the WWE, John Laurinaitis. And so this thing just got me like, I was like, this is ridiculous. So he's the other person that's named in this, and basically he's the person that she would kind of send her off to. Um, and so he came out through his lawyer with the statement that was basically saying like, I'm a victim too. Right. So this woman who's being sent to me, like, I'm a we're both victims of Vince McMahon. And it's like, no, you're an adult, whatever, 60, 50, 60-year old, multimillionaire at this point, executive of a major publicly traded corporation. He can't force you to, because he alluded or it's kind of, alluded to the fact that, or the idea that he felt he needed to do it to keep his job, and that they're both the victims of this. And it's like, no, you're not a victim in this situation. Like, I don't care who, at that point, there's no, no one's forcing you to cheat on your wife with a woman. And even if that was the case, then you hang out in the hotel room and just say like, look, we'll hang out and watch TV, but it's all ridiculous. Like that part really got me as well. I mean, it's all awful. But that was also like, yeah, no, you're not a victim in this. And it just makes it's a bad look to even say you're a victim in any of this.
It's feel bad for her. Terrible stuff. Once again, not shocked. This, Vince's depravity has been well documented over the decades, and he's not a good person. He's a sociopath. He's a bad human being. He's just not a good person. And we've known this for a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like this kind of thing. It's still shocking, just the volume of things. Like, when you read the story, from like crapping on her in the middle of a session. Like, it's just like there's just so much involved that I think it's just the volume of things that she had to go through is just got to be overwhelming. And also the other thing is like, so I guess she was there was a settlement, and he just stopped paying on the settlement. So again, it's one of those things. It's like, why would, if you did all that and you almost got yourself in trouble and you were able to settle, why would you stop paying? It's also like the other weird thing of all of it is like, and so he stopped paying, and now she's suing him.
He
all
felt
of it's
like
out.
He didn't have to.
He had to resign. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? I guess that's supposedly his MO from like the days of the territories, where buying territories, and then reneging on whatever the deal is. And that's also the interesting thing is with him, it's just how manipulative he is. Is one of the stories that a lot of or not just a lot of people will say about him is that like they'll go into a meeting with him with one idea, and by the end of the meeting, he's convinced them of the exact opposite and made them think that they thought of it. It's kind of one of those, like, that's how manipulative of a person he is. So I know that some people like, how could she, have gone through it, this or whatever. And it's like, he's a sociopath. He's, incredibly manipulative. And also like you have someone who's going through trauma. And you can't put yourself in that person's shoes, because we're not in that position. And it's clearly somebody who was vulnerable and with somebody who is a serious predator. So yeah, just an awful situation. And hopefully, like, look, okay, he's gonna have a massive fall from grace, and this might ruin whatever legacy I guess he was gonna have. And
is there talk of is there talk of any criminal charges?
I didn't see anything. As far as I know, this is just a civil suit. But who knows? Who knows what else is going to come out? You just never know. I think a lot of times with things like this, right? Like, because it's like, this can't be the first person he's done this to. And so does, I mean, maybe it is, but it's like, it's highly doubtful. So, is that just like the first domino to fall? And then like, we'll find out in, a few months that like, there's dozens of other victims or something. So yeah, it's something that it's just a crazy story, a sad story, and hopefully he faces the consequences. He's as he should. Nobody should get away with anything like that. All right, so enough with the sad stuff. Let's talk about some Reacher. So you had a friend. I know you said we were going
Oh
to try to
boy.
get somebody on the show, and then you told me you had a story. So what's the story about the
So
guest host that couldn't make
so
it?
I was at a it's really funny. I was at a party a few months back, and a friend of mine was telling me how he was really into how he would was really into the I thought he said the Reacher books, right, would make
Mhm.
sense. And I was like, "Oh well, that's perfect. We're going to do a podcast. You should come on." And he actually asked me because he had listened to the Gymwits, and he was like, "Oh, are you doing a podcast?" I was like, "Oh well, absolutely, we are. We are doing the Portable Hall podcast, which is more of a like a geek pop culture thing for for topics that we enjoy and that other people that are sort of our age and around our age will might enjoy. Young, who knows? But I was, and he's a very smart dude, and he's a great speaker. And I was like, oh, this would, and he always makes really great conversation. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. Why don't you come on the show? And we agreed to it. And and so I texted him and I said, "So, do you want to come on the podcast? You remember we talked about it?" He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah. So what's the format? Blah blah." And I explained to him. He's like, "So what's the topic?" I was like, "We're talking about Reacher." He's like, "Huh?" Um, I was like, "Remember you talked to me about how you would come in, you were into all the books." He's like, "Oh well, I read a lot of books, but I read mostly like Nietzsche and Herman Hesse and Dostoevsky or whatever and existential stuff." And I was like, "Well, I love that stuff, but I don't remember." I was like, "Now, could it be?" So now another thing is funny. I thought maybe he said Reaper, which is funny because you've recently released Debt to the Ceaseless Reaper, which is awesome, right? But well, I think there was another graphic novel, Reaper,
Mhm.
right? So I thought
Yeah,
maybe he was talking about that. He was like, "Nope."
yeah.
So he was like, "I have no clue what you're talking about."
So
I was
what
like,
was he?
"We had this conversation. I have no clue." And he was like, "Look, I don't know what I've told you. It's
Hmm.
like maybe all the booze after all these years have gone to my head." I swear I explained to him what the podcast was about. He's like, "Oh yeah, I went and I read these books." And he's like, "Nope, no idea what you're talking about." So it will be my life's goal now to figure out what
Weird.
books he was talking about.
So speaking of, so you haven't read any of the Reacher books, right?
I have not.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for me, it's like I come into it as it's one of those like I feel like the Reacher books are like Seven Dust to me, which is like it is. It's like just it's that thing that just kind of it's easy to take. It hits the spot. Right, like every Seven Dust comes out a new album, and it's like it's not they're not amazing. Well, I like them a lot, and I think they're an amazing live band, right? But the
Yeah.
music's not like you know it's nothing that's going to set the world on fire. It's not innovative or but it's generally they kind of everything's kind of the same, but it just hits the spot, and every time it just works. And same thing with the Reacher book. So basically, like every year, that time of year comes around, a new book comes out, and again, it's not gonna not winning any Pulitzers, but like it's just solid. It hits the spot. It tells the stories in the way I
It's
like
like
it. I love the
comfort food in
character.
a way.
Love the way that Lee Child writes. Exactly, comfort food. That's my yeah my aging brain not being able to think of that simple word. But yes, they're both like they're like comfort food for me, right? So that's where I come to it, is basically like I've read all the books because I at some point I'm like a completionist. So I remember way back a personal training client, giving me, it was like I was going on a flight, and she's like, "Oh, read this," and it was the first Reacher book, and it was like, "Oh, this is cool, I like it." So I just got another one and got another one, and then at some point I was like, "All right, well, I've read seven, let me finish the series," and then I finished the series, and I would just keep on every every year I just, when the new book will come out, I read it. And again, like there's some that are really, really good. There's some that are, not that great, but it all kind of hits the spot. And, I just love that character. And so every time a new book comes out, even if I'm maybe a little apathetic towards reading it initially, once I start it, I'm just into the story. I like Lee Child's, how he tells stories. And then there was the Tom Cruise movies that came out. And I don't know if you saw those, and we won't go too much into that, but basically the issue is, like, as you can see, Reacher is a massive guy. In the books, he's a massive cat. He's huge.
And it
He's
plays into the
6'5",
plot a lot.
and he's just a force of nature. Yeah, absolutely. Like, he is a force of nature. He's somebody who you see him from a mile away and you're like, who the hell is this big ugly guy? Like, what the hell is, who is this guy? Like, that's it, right? And Tom Cruise, who's got his own his own presence, and he's got massive balls with some of the stunts he's able to do. Like, Tom Cruise is my height, if not shorter. He's not a massive person. So no matter what his acting ability, that is not the character. And I think a lot of fans of the books had that issue. And like, the movies were serviceable movies if it was about anybody but Jack Reacher, who, a massive part of this character is his physicality and his fight style based on that physicality. And I remember there was this hilarious, I remember reading an interview with Lee Child where the author, this is after, like, it was announced, and he had to he had some very diplomatic response to that, which is basically like, oh, Reacher's a force of nature, and Tom Cruise is a force of nature. So it was just like, come on, in his head, it's like, okay, either it's, look, I've got this massive movie star attached to my books or whatever, or like, he just had to come up with a diplomatic thing to say. But whatever the case,
he's getting paid a buttload. Like, of course he's going to go along with it.
Okay, so for, like, it's a weird spot, right? So for me, as somebody who has now written a graphic novel, and I've got a couple other things in the works, right? There is something to be said for that, right? Like, if you have a character that has very specific traits, would you sell out in order to, would you sell out the integrity of that character in order to make some money, or in order to get the notoriety, or in order to get it out there? That is a fair question. Like, I don't know what I would do, right? If you're like, hey,
I think it always depends on how much is some money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like it's fair. It's like, I don't know. If they're like, hey, Tom Cruise wants to play this character who's like black, do I change that character? And if that's an integral part of the character, do I change that because Tom Cruise wants to do it? I don't know what I would do.
Well, what is the think of the name of one of the longest running game shows?
I don't know what. Jeopardy?
No.
Wheel of Fortune?
No.
All right, what? Just say it.
The Price is Right.
Okay.
If the price is right, you'll change the character.
Okay, all right. I guess.
Comes down
Although
to.
I would, here's what I would say though. If you're saying me right now, pretty much living paycheck to paycheck, not complaining, but like, me right now, and you're like, hey, give you a buttload of money to take this character who's got very specific traits that are part of the character and make it something else, I'd probably take it right now because I could use that money. But if I had a level of success, I may not, right? Because at that point, it's like, I don't need that. I guess anybody needs, I don't know what kind of lifestyle he lives or whatever, but like, I feel like
the price is right. There's always the right price.
I guess, I don't know.
You have very wealthy people who do things when the price is right. So that's what it always comes down to.
All right. So season 1 of Reacher was a bit of like a revelation because Alan Ritchson, who was playing him, embodies that character. He's probably a little bit too like bodybuilding built for Reacher, but whatever. I'm not gonna nitpick at it, right? He's a massive guy who's huge, who you see him and it's like, who the hell is that guy? Like, right? That is Reacher, right? He's a physical force of nature that you see and is terrifying, if he needs to be. And I felt season 1 did a really good job with the character, with his fighting, with a lot of the action, with the choreography. It took the story and adapted it really well. So this isn't a season 1 review, but you can't really talk about season 1 without talking about season 2. And as somebody who's a fan of the books, I loved season 1 because I think it really got the character and it was still fun. It had great choreography. And again, it told a good story and a good supporting cast. So what are your quick thoughts? Like when you saw season 1, what are your thoughts on initial thoughts of the character of this world?
It it worked. That's the bet.
Yeah.
I didn't question any of it. Look, we know that that with a show like this, you have to suspend your disbelief. That's fine. I was totally willing to do it. At no point did I ever say, "Oh, come on!" Like even the jail scene,
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, that's fine."
Yeah.
It worked, and I like the way they developed the characters and we'll get to the villains because I didn't think they were particularly strong in either
No, we're talking about season one.
on either
Okay,
season. I
neither
didn't
season.
think they
Okay,
were
yeah,
particularly strong, but they were a little bit
yeah,
better in season one because they annoyed you. Right. And there was also
yeah,
some red herrings and a few little things
yeah,
like that where you thought, oh, it's this, and then they hit you with oh no, it's not that, like, with a couple funky little reveals and
yeah,
false leads. So it was good. It was totally
yeah,
entertaining. It flew by very quickly, and I liked the supporting cast, right? Because he had there was a great foil to him, his exact polar opposite character, right? And
yeah,
then there was his romance interest, who was quirky as well. So it
yeah. And they
all
had good
sort
chemistry.
of they had really good chemistry, and it was, yeah, it was interesting. The there was actually one thing that annoyed me a little bit, and that was the blues angle. It was like,
Okay. Oh,
really,
really?
it was like, come on,
But that's
come
part
on,
that
like,
was in the story. Like I liked it.
okay,
That's like
fair enough.
that's okay.
It's
So here's the
That
thing.
was
And
so strange that he's following just because this blues guy, he goes to this town just to follow up on that. Like that was
so
the one thing I was like,
no, I disagree.
really,
100%
really.
disagree. I disagree. So,
Okay,
all right,
okay, okay,
this isn't a season one review, but
okay, okay,
um,
okay.
so first of all, I will do that. Like, I'll be on a vacation and I will find some random obscure thing and just like take a detour for hours to see whatever about some obscure thing. But I think that's the character, right? Like, he's got his
Okay.
very specific likes. He's basically he's like hobo Batman, right? Like he
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't he lives with his toothbrush, right? Like that, he has nothing, and so he's got nowhere to go. So like he can just on a whim decide, you know what, this blues singer was from that place. It's as good a place as any. Let's go.
Let's just
Like
do it. Yeah.
that's totally the character. And like I said, like I can empathize with that. Like
It's
I
just a
totally
massive
will
coincidence
go out
that
of
his
my way
brother's there, and
for.
that everything happens in this
Okay, no,
one
yeah. So you
random
do have
town.
to
Like, okay,
yes. So it
fair
is a
enough. I can
show like
suspend.
there's a lot of suspension of disbelief with the show. So like that's fine. I'm just saying the blues angle, I kind of that's
It
totally
wasn't
his
just the
character.
blues angle, but it was the whole that's
Yeah.
what led him
Yeah.
to this
No,
one random town in the U.S.
yeah.
where his brother is involved and all this stuff is going down.
No,
Really, like,
that's an
it
insane
just
coincidence. It makes no sense. Yeah, no, you're
I
100%
don't
right on
love
that. You're 100%
coincidences.
right on that. There's for both of the seasons, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief to allow any of this to work. But generally, the ridiculousness of it and the action, especially in season one, makes you forget all that and not forget it, but it's
Sure,
like, all right, I'm in. I'm just gonna go for it. I'm not gonna
very
nitpick.
entertaining.
But let's get to season two, because I felt like season two, may or may not have dropped the ball. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. So, I guess without giving your review away fully, just kind of high level, right? What were your thoughts? Like, did you think season two was a letdown compared to season one?
I don't know if I would call it a letdown, but I was not as captivated by it. Let's just say they went really
Yeah,
far on the special ops sort of thing, and it was just
yeah,
it was like the episodes all sort of melded into each other, and it's hard, like, the story sort of developed, and there was this thing about the I guess the big underlying uh issue was, well, was the member of the team, did he betray them, was he in on it, was he, this, there was a lot of that aspect, and it just went on, and there was no real intrigue or mystery. You knew who the villains were pretty soon, and it was, you know what it turned, it seemed more like like an old cartoon where you knew the villains
Yeah.
and they just were worked as foils for each other, and there wasn't
Yeah.
much, like, the action was fun and stuff like that, but there wasn't
Yeah.
much of a strong plot developing. It just wasn't.
Yeah. Well,
It
that
didn't
so
have
that's
that
the thing.
same intrigue as the first
Yes.
season.
So and this is where the books kind of, so the first season and the first book is really good because it has an interesting story, and it's about, like, the thing about the first few books that I really liked, and this is going to be me, and it's not to compare the books to TV, but it's more for me like
Sure.
context. I'm not going to be like, oh, the books are better and then whatever, I'm not, I don't like to be that guy. But I do think that the books give a lot of context into the story, and explain why I think there were I think I know why choices were made. Basically, so I'll give you a couple of kind of pieces, bits of context here. So generally, like, the thing about the first book and the first season and some of the subsequent books is they're a lot of times about something about, specifically about America, often, that we don't know a lot about. So book one
Yeah.
is about counterfeiting, right? The story is counterfeiting. What you don't get in the TV show, because you can't go into that detail, is the book goes into great detail about how money is made, the history of currency, and how counterfeiting works, and it really goes into great detail about that one little thing. And
Yeah.
what I liked about the first few books is every book kind of had its angle. Like, here's some obscure weird thing you don't think about, but there's a lot of information on it, and I really liked. So I felt like we didn't get that aspect of it in season two, and it kind of affected the story. Part one. Part two is Reacher is generally a loner. So what happens is he's this loner who finds himself in a town, and something happens, and he's got to help figure it out. And while he's in that town, he's going to meet, he's usually going to meet somebody that's going to help him out. He's going to meet somebody that's going to be his love interest, and then he's going to meet the villains, and then sometimes the love interest or the friend turns out to be villain. Whatever it is like he goes from town to town, meeting new people, experiencing, and being Reacher around new people. And this book, in chronological order, or at least in book order, doesn't happen until like the 13th or 14th book. So from a reader's perspective, right? Because the team up book happens after you've gotten a dozen books of Reacher being a loner. So then it's like, okay, here's something different. What I don't think it works in season two, because I want more of Reacher being a loner. I want
Sure.
more of Reacher showing up in a town, meet people, and then beat the hell out of people, and then go on to the next town. And then maybe in season 5 or 6 we're like, all right, cool, let's get the team up. So because we got the team up so early, I think we lost a lot of what makes that character and what makes it work, and
Sure.
what made, I think, season 1 work. Because I just didn't, I was never bought into the special investigators unit. Like, I never really cared about that group, and so I never really cared about the flashbacks. And I think his chemistry with the woman that plays Neagley is great. Like, I think she's great, and they have great chemistry. She was in season 1, but the rest of the team I could care less for, and I could care less for that story. So that's part of also where I just felt it just didn't work.
Yeah, I just didn't get why they jumped into the whole the team up special ops sort of thing. And I know that there was a history, like they could have touched on some of the history, but continued along the lines of the first season with, as you said, he's a loner. He's he's in this town. It's a lot more interesting, and it's just sort of turned into this like a team sort of deal where everyone they're working together, and there's no intrigue. The characters, and there's no they don't develop it all. There's not
Yeah.
much to it. Like
Yeah.
what you're getting after the second episode of the season, and that's it. And it just goes and it just progresses along those lines. Um, is the love story is sort of like meh.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
really advance anything. It's not very interesting. It's like, yeah, they touched. Oh, there was always something going on between them. It's like
Yeah.
right. And it's just
Again,
it everything that like sort of, as you said, that what was very charming about the first season was completely gone, and it just turned
yeah.
into a caricature of the of Reacher based on the first season. It's him, but now in a completely different context that is just not interesting
Yeah.
at all. And funny that the
Well, yeah, let's get
interesting
into that.
villain the interesting villain had no role. It like showed up for
Yeah.
like little things, and then the boring villain had all the screen time. It's like and then they, you see what I'm saying? There was a good
Yeah.
villain, and he wasn't a part of the plot at all. And then it was
Yeah. And then he dies like nothing.
and then they just kill him off weirdly, and it's like
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
there
agree.
was
I think
there was some the last episode was not good. Like I did not like
yeah.
did not enjoy then some of the choices they made where they
Yeah.
where they shot down the plane. A spoiler alert, where they shot down the
Yeah.
helicopter at the end. They let it go just to shoot it down. Like
Yeah.
really. Like it made no sense. Just like
Yeah.
you're just killing people and sort of these are the
Yeah.
good guys. Like you're doing it for
Yeah.
fun. It's like, oh, let them think they're going to escape and then let's shoot them down. No,
Yeah.
that's psychopathic.
Like he doesn't like as a character. Like he doesn't.
Made
Yeah.
no sense.
Like he
That's
kills
not
for
who they
justice.
are.
He kills to save himself. But he doesn't like murder people for fun, and that was kind of
And
a
they
weird,
and like taunt them in the
weird
process.
character choice.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah, it was weird.
And,
that was a
like,
weird choice.
The whole ending was just
Yeah.
not.
And
not
I think
good.
I do think that was an
Really.
issue. Like the villains like were not interesting and didn't have much to do, and they were just very much mustache twirling. Like there was no, we're in an age now where I think a lot of our, when we get villains, at least whether or not you agree with them and whether they're like genocidal or crazy or whatever, like they at least have a purpose often, and like you can at least understand their perspective whether or not you agree with it. In this case, it wasn't. It was like, okay, here's a rich guy who just wants to make some more money, and then another guy that kind of brokers that, but there was no motivation for them. So for me, it's like, well, they were just very just like generic, mustache twirly, like we're villains for the sake of being villains. And yeah, it just kind of it rubbed me the wrong way this season, and yeah, I agree, like season one's villains weren't it wasn't like the Joker in the Dark Knight or something, but like at least they
There was
at least
something
they
to
were
them.
interesting,
Like
and
they had
and presented a threat.
substance. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And this one is like, okay, here's a guy who's just kind of, it didn't make sense. And I think the other thing is there were a lot of, like you talked about, if the show is fun and I'm having a good time, I'll look past a lot of those glaring things. So like you mentioned, like his brother, in season one, like, yeah, those are pretty massive coincidences that take a lot of suspension of disbelief. But if you're having a good time, yeah, you're always allowed one, right? Yeah, that's our rule. But even beyond that, like if you're having fun with something, I think it's a lot easier to swallow that. It's like, all right, look, because like again, when I tell people about research, like, look, it's crazy, it's insane, it's kind of dumb sometimes, but it's so much fun. And again, it's like it's poor Batman, like just just roll with it. I can say that about season one. I can't say that about season two. So like a lot of things stood out. So I'll give you a couple things that really drove me crazy, and maybe you can tell me if there's anything else. But like, so there was remember when they were attacked by the motorcycle gang that's supposed to murder them, but they attack them without guns. So you have a motorcycle gang that attacks them, but with no guns, even though everybody else everywhere has guns all over the place. There is the guy traveling with the missiles. So they're stealing all these missiles that are extremely valuable, and he's traveling by himself with no backup.
Oh yeah, that drove me
$600 million
bonkers. I
missiles.
remember saying that at the time. Oh, this ultra security risk of these expensive. What, they're not going to have an armed fleet carrying it? It's like, give me a break. Just one. It made no
it's
sense.
crazy. There was like people don't lock their phones. Like every phone you have to lock it, and there were situations where they get bad guys' phones and you just swipe it open. Like at least like, and then like there was another point where there was a big fight at a construction site, and it had clearly been closed probably for hours, but there was still wet cement at the site, which again made no sense. So it was like there's just all these things. It was like lazy writing almost. Like why would you? It's just there's just such glaring things that, a couple times they try to write things away with one line or so, but it was just, none of it made sense to me. Was there anything that stood out to you?
Well, the going sort of back to the villains, there is a head villain who gets no motivation. Basically, the politician, there's nothing about him. It's like he's the head, like the ultimate, like, you have these other guys, and it all comes down to him at the end. And like, what's, his motivation is we don't want any loose ends. That's the motivation. It's like, come Come on.
Yeah.
The funny I did like the one character, the police officer, right?
Yeah.
Who that to me was actually the best. Um him and Reacher sort of going back and forth. That was the best part
Yeah.
of the thing, and then they killed him off, which I guess is fine,
Yeah.
right? He goes
Yeah.
down sort of in a heroic blaze of glory, which is fine. That was actually the
Yeah.
best part of the
Yeah.
season, which I liked. They had a good chemistry. They were the only characters with good chemistry, I thought.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right, and then they sort of go into the
The
family. Another thing was, and I'll harp on this last episode. The last 20 minutes was nothing. It was like
Yeah.
them giving out money, and it was
Yeah.
like there was no suspense. It just, I don't know. It was,
Yeah. It was
the,
weird choice. Like,
ugh.
you haven't watched Fargo. We were talking about that, like because the last episode of Fargo had a similar thing where like the big stuff happened early, and so it was kind of a long, drawn out ending. Cynic and I disagreed on it. I to an extent. I liked it because I thought that it was a very impactful, like, last couple of minutes. So basically, like, it was this thing where the action happens early, then the most of the rest of the show or the episode was kind of just long and dragged out, and kind of an epilogue giving you, this is what this person's doing, this is what that person's doing, but then you get this very impactful scene at the end that was like a big swing to me, and I thought it worked. So in this case, it was kind of similar, but there was no swing. It was just like it just kind of ended on a whimper. So yeah,
The
not
big thing
great.
is
And
I
the other
can't
thing,
separate the episodes in my head. Like I
yeah,
remember,
well, that's the other thing. It was just kind of,
I remember they had remember the woman who worked for the company, and they had to protect her, right? Sort of out of nowhere.
yeah,
They don't establish her character at all, right? That she
yeah,
knows she's scared, and like you thought that she was in on it, but then turns out she's just doing her thing, and now they're after her, and they have to protect her, and then she just disappears. They're like, like just there are loose, like, that was another thing. It's like, all right, so these villains hate loose ends. They put no effort into, like, Reacher's like, oh, she's with friends, you'll never find her.
yeah,
Okay, let's just give up. Right, these very, very wealthy people
yeah,
with reach, and they know
yeah,
politicians, and they can get everywhere. Okay, oh, Reacher says we can't find her, so we're just gonna give up. Yeah, that makes total sense.
yeah. No, pretty ridiculous. Yeah, no. So yeah, I think we're in agreement
It's
on
childish.
kind of where the season was. So the one other thing I'll say, before we give our kind of final thoughts and rating, is that I was disappointed in the fight scenes too, because I felt, and again, this is probably part of the team up part. Like, Reacher, one of the fun things about him in the books is he's a great, so one, and again, this is really hard to do on TV. So another cool thing about him in the books, and something that even has influenced, like, my own, like, one thing, there's this one I've told you for a long time, but there's one book I'm writing, and there's this scene that I've always, like, loved writing, because it's about, like, it's like fight theory, like, you're getting into somebody's head that is fighting, and the strategy they're using. And so a lot of the books is interesting because you're in his head as far as what choices he's making when he's fighting, and you can't do that on TV. So fine, but I thought that season one had really good fight scenes and really good fight choreography,
Sure.
and you got to see him being, again, this just wrecking ball. He's not, he's somebody, he does use strategy, but he's also just a massive person who just is, again, a wrecking ball. He's going to beat the hell out of you, and it takes a lot to take him down. And I feel like we didn't get as much of that. Like, we got a lot of him shooting people, and we got him shooting a helicopter, but we didn't get the same, like, outside of the time that was the one awesome scene is when he kicks the front of the car and the and the airbag pops out. That was pretty awesome, but we don't get the physicality that we got, I think, in season one, and I was a little disappointed in that.
Well, for instance, that one scene where all the I mean, what was it? When they're in what was it, the truck yard, they're around where all the trucks are, and those guys show up, and they're like, oh, well, look, and who was, they had law enforcement show up on their side. It was lame, because and even the people he was fighting against, what was their motivation? Oh, they're just hired guns.
Yeah.
Like that annoyed me too, because some of the people that he was fighting in the first season, they had a vested interest in fighting him.
Yeah.
Everyone he fought in season two was a hired gun or the villain.
Yeah.
So it's hard to believe you have that sort of motivation to to fight when you're a hired gun. People are just gonna, it's like, why am I gonna risk my life? Like, what, just because you're getting paid? Oh, you're gonna risk your life? Doesn't make any sense. Like in the first season,
Yeah. No.
people, they were invested in what they were doing. So I think that's a big thing too.
Yeah.
Like the people he was fighting in the first season were not faceless. In the second season, they were.
Yeah.
So that to me has a lot to do with it as well. Why and of course less hand to hand, more explosions and gunfires and stuff like that, which is fine if it's done really well, but it wasn't done all that well.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's disappointing. It was definitely a disappointing season just compared to how much fun season 1 was. So, all right. So, Justin, give me just your final thoughts on this season, as if you need to give us more, and your rating on a scale of 1 to 10.
1 to 10. First season, I'm going to give it an 8. I thought it's worth watching, very entertaining. Second season, I'm going to give it a 3. Just not. You can't discern. Like, look, I don't know. Like, it's just not. It's almost not worth watching. It's boring. It's not compelling. Even from the first, it's fun. Even from the first episode, I was like, oh, this is not going to be as good. Like, just right away, it just wasn't. It wasn't as gripping. It's not. I'll give it a 3 because there's a lot of other shows out there that you could, with limited time, you're really going to waste your time on this whole season.
Yeah.
Find something else to watch.
All right. So I echo a lot of your sentiments. I think that in the books, like I said, he's a force of nature. But he's a loner force of nature, and I think that's where he works best. And I think this season suffers from giving us something that maybe would have worked better later on. But also, I just think the season, it's just suffered from like lazy writing. There were boring villains, very cliched lines, except there was one really good line, which where someone says, I forget exactly what it is, but like, what do you think? Is it the first person shooter? And Reacher says, I am a first person shooter. So somebody grew up gaming. That was a cool line. Like that worked, right? Like that was a pretty damn good line. I remember when he said, I was like,
but it's sort of like,
but yeah,
it's like fandom though, right? It's like when you write
but still.
Like,
yeah, but it works. It worked, at least that line. But otherwise, otherwise there was very uninteresting characters to me outside of Neely and Reacher, and maybe I'm forgetting the other the cop's name now. But outside of those 3, I could care less about any other character on the show. And I just wanted to see more Reacher fighting. I think even the fight choreography was just lazy compared to season 1, and it was just because of that, all of the unbelievable, ridiculous things stood out. I still think, look, it was somewhat fun in spots, but I really do hope that season 3 pivots back to what made season 1 work. So for me, it's a big disappointment. I'm not going to go as low as a 3. I think if you're a fan of Reacher, like, fine, it's fine watching, but I'm going to give it a 6.5.
What about the first season?
So first season, I give it. It's weird because I'm a little biased. I'm going to give it an 8.5 because I think it is as a fan of the property, I think they did a really good job as a fan, and I think it captured the character. And again, it's a fun season. It's if you can sit and nitpick and maybe drop that score, but I think an 8.5 just because I just had a blast with that season. And so that's what makes this one just more of a little bit of a gut punch, just because that first season was so good that this one was quite a bit of a letdown. I'm hopeful that if they could do it right in season 1, they could do it right again, but let's we'll see see what happens in season 3. I know it's renewed for season 3, so we shall see.
Sure it is.
All right, everyone, so thank you for listening to the show. Feedback is always welcome. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can catch us at portableholepublishing.com. Everything is up there. Got a newsletter coming out. Definitely subscribe to that when it is out. And on social media, pretty much everything is at portable_hole, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, thanks again, Justin. And until next time,
watch out for the hole.